Well, welcome everybody to another Monday Masterclass. Now today, we're going to get outside the realm of blueprinting and talk about Minesweeper project de-risking. And we'll talk a little bit about how it fits, because I've done a very good job of confusing people with this concept. When do you do blueprinting? When do you do Minesweeper de-risking? How do they fit? Minesweeper de-risking is something we started developing about 5 years ago. And it was only last year that it all really came together for us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in here. Now, what I'm going to do is move on out to the Blueprinting Center. Let me go here right now. And when you're in the Blueprinting Center, you can always click on Launch Star, which is our product launch software, and you can click on Minesweeper here. And you don't have to have a license to click on any of these. And when you're in Minesweeper, you can really see everything that we have here. The only thing that you cannot do is if you don't have a subscription, you can't open up the Minesweeper software. So let's poke around a little bit in here. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is, as we usually do, go to the Blue Help Center. And of course, over in blueprinting, we've got the Blue Help Center. It is probably 90% about blueprinting, but we did add the Blue Help here. And when you click on this, you're going to see that there is a little bit of information on Minesweeper right here. And then we get into the rest of the Blue Help. Now, under Blue, I'm going to start with blueprinting methodology. You may not have spent a lot of time in this Blue Help section. This is where we go into what it is and how it's learned and applied. But we also have a lot of what we call fit articles. How does it fit with stage gate, fit with strategic planning, fit with design thinking, fit with lean startup? Oh, there we go. How does it fit with Minesweeper de-risking? Now, I won't drag you through these in excruciating detail, but let me just show you very briefly what's here in case you want to come back later. So, excuse me. So first, we have a little bit of a background article, developing products for unfamiliar markets. And many of you I know are familiar with the Ansoff matrix. So what we find is, especially as you get out of the core, familiar markets and familiar technologies, Minesweeper de-risking is really helpful. I especially think it's powerful, excuse me, for going into unfamiliar markets. So that's an area that you can take a little peek at earlier. And then the next article in here is kind of a conceptual article. It's why uncertainty is different than risk. You might say, well, who cares? Well, here's the deal. A lot of companies get into problems because they take these big transformational projects and they start signing probabilities of success and risk factors and net present value, and they don't have nearly enough information. If you look up the word risk in the dictionary, you have to be able to assign a probability of a negative event. And early on in these transformational projects, we simply don't know enough. So what we say is, let's deal with uncertainty, not risk. And the job we'll put in front of us is moving our projects from uncertainty to certainty in terms of a bunch of assumptions. Now, those assumptions we'll get into in this article a little bit. We have these things we call landmines. Those are really assumptions that were not detected early enough. They can blow up projects, schedules, all kinds of things. And I'll let you look at this later, but this is a matter of we know what we know what we think, we know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. How do we deal with all those things? And the methodology I'll show you helps us with this. And then the fourth article we have here is really getting into the Minesweeper de-risking methodology a little bit more. And I won't go through this, but this is kind of a handy article. It talks about how in a simulation, Acme Composites, they would go through the process of setting up, generating assumptions and working on a certainty matrix and so forth. I'll go into that in more detail in another area here. And then the last thing we've got here under the See More is where blueprinting fits with Minesweeper. And this is the one that I do think confuses people a lot. So imagine you were doing a Minesweeper project, okay? And this is what the timeline might look like. You form your team, you do secondary research. At some point, you do a de-risking workshop. It could be a 2-day face-to-face, lately we've been doing a series of 2-hour web conferences with teams. And I'll show you the actual process we go through on this. But let's imagine you finish that. And a lot of your assumptions had to do with, does a customer want this? Does a customer require that? A lot of customer-oriented questions. That's where blueprinting can come in. So discovery and preference interviews are often used as tools that nest within the larger Minesweeper framework. So think of Minesweeper as a framework for managing risk. Just like you have a Gantt chart for managing timelines and resources and tasks, well, Minesweeper de-risking is a framework for handling risk. Now, do you have to use blueprinting? Absolutely not. We've done some work with Sony, and they are not a B2B company. And it would not be appropriate to use B2B methods to go do interviews on their customers. So they use different methods for that. So that's how blueprinting fits a little bit. There's also a little bit in here you could read on your own. What we found was blueprinting wasn't completely up to the task for unfamiliar markets. Blueprinting is great for finding out what a market would like to get, but sometimes it misses what an unfamiliar market is already getting. And when you're going up against suppliers who have got all these competencies built up over the years, it's really wise to get all of your assumptions out there, because you may focus on customers, how they use your product, but you miss how they acquire it, how they learn about it, how they dispose of it. And so this framework is kind of an insurance policy to make sure that you not only find out what customers want that they're not getting, but you find out what they're not getting that they want to keep getting. So those are the articles we've got underneath how blueprinting fits with let me see if I got that clicked right. Let me try that again. There we go. We might just have a row. Oh, there we go. Sorry. That's the articles here. Now there's a bunch more articles under Minesweeper de-risking. I won't take you through these, but it will walk you through the 7 steps of Minesweeper project de-risking. So there you see them, and I'm going to show you these in just a jiffy here. So that's about it for the Blue Help. Any questions on the Blue Help portion of this before I take you to the next step level here? You guys good so far? Okay. Now back to the Minesweeper tab, which again is right next to your, almost next to your blueprinting tab here. Again, anything you want, you can get at for free, except you have to have a subscription for the Minesweeper software. So feel free to come out here sometime if you want, watch the video. There's a nice 33-page simulation of how this company takes on a project in an unfamiliar packaging market. There's a quick start card and other stuff here. Now, let me pull this up, because this is probably the handiest tool you can have to follow along. What I'm going to do now is dive into the software. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but very quickly give you a sense for what these 7 steps look like. And here's what they are. We start by let me blow that up a little bit here. There we go. We start by brainstorming assumptions that must be true for our project to succeed. And you'll see we've got 3 different colors here. Then we're going to build a consumption chain to think about their customer needs from the customer's perspective. Then everybody individually goes off on the team and rates these assumptions for impact and certainty. And we do it on an individual basis first, and then we come back and do a group rating. But doing it individually helps us avoid groupthink. I'll explain that more. Then the team resolves its impact and certainty ratings. They look over their certainty matrices, and then they create a checkpoint plan. Think of this as an action plan, where who does what by when, to investigate these assumptions to make sure they don't blow up our project. And then we do management reports. So that is what the 7-step process looks like. Now, as I mentioned, you have to have a subscription, but Scott did sign me up for a subscription to Minesweeper. So I get to click on this and I open it up here, and now I'm in the projects. Now, you might have a whole lot of projects in here, but there's always going to be 2 that will never go away. These are the demos. And of course, just like blueprinting, You can come in and start new projects whenever you want. You can add other people to your team and so on and so forth. Now, what I'm going to do is show you how this starts at the workshop. You can think of this as two phases. One is, what's a team do at that kickoff workshop, whether it be a 2-day affair, or maybe we do a series of 2-hour web conferences over maybe 3 weeks or something. Now, when we get in here, just like blueprinting, you can always add more team members, rename your project, things like that. And just like blueprinting, we start at the top and we work our way from north to south on this thing. Now, the first thing we do is we create these assumptions. This is like a brainstorming session. And we put them in 3 buckets. And the buckets are explained here. A market dynamic, these would be external factors we do not control. So you might have things like, concerning this market's dynamics, it must be true that customers are willing to pay a fair price premium. Hit the next button, they'll make buying decisions in a timely fashion. The entire value chain. These are things we don't control. So we brainstorm a bunch of these, and then we think about internal capabilities. And these are things we do control. And these go on the purple ones. It must be true that we can faithfully scale up our product, account for variation. So the team is brainstorming all these things. And then the last section we go to are customer outcomes. These are either required or they're desired. And they're generally something we could potentially influence. Maybe they need to keep the same fluting size. By the way, this is a corrugated box venture where they're going to add some plastic recycled material to boost things like abrasion resistance, water resistance. That's the theory here, okay? And you can see, maintain existing fluting size, continue using existing disposal. Notice we're always completing this sentence. Over the years when we developed this, we found if we didn't get very rigorous and disciplined on how to phrase these, we would get in all kinds of trouble, okay? After we do a bunch of required, then we can get a bunch of desired. It would be helpful if we met customers' desire to. Now, here's something they'd like us to do: decrease the time needed to pack and seal these boxes. Now, those are all the brainstorm assumptions, but as they say on late night TV, but wait, there's more, because we have some typical assumptions. And so we built this kind of safety net of market dynamics and of typical assumptions for internal capabilities. And then we got a whole bunch of them here for required and desired customer outcomes. So if somebody looks at this and goes, ooh, I like this one, be assured of a backup source, they just click it, and then it is added to our list at the bottom here, okay? So that's the first step. We've got 1 down, 6 to go. Any questions so far? All righty. So then the next thing is we build a consumption chain. And this would be, in this case, like a map of how companies like Amazon would use corrugated packaging. They got to figure out their inventory needs, order them, receive them, store the corrugated box. So we build this out first as a team. And then as we're looking at, we say, are there any other outcomes that we can think of here? So we go to the end of the list here, and somebody goes, store corrugated box. Oh, hey, I have one here. We must meet customers' requirements to, in fact, maybe this is a desire to resist, try that again. Resist humidity in warehouses in Houston type locations. So we surmise that might be an outcome that we would hear. And so we're going to see. Now, we might find that, no, they don't care about that, but that's something we would put in here. So the whole purpose of consumption chain is simply to generate more customer outcomes that we might not have thought of earlier, okay? Now, when we do this, these things could be all helter-skelter. They could be all over the place. You don't have to go in any particular order on these things. And if you want at any point in time, you can always and clean them up a little bit by hitting this little button here. I won't do it right now. Now, the other thing we do after we finish step 2 is we now get ready for the individual ratings. And there's always a little instruction here. We're going to review these for proper phrasing, make sure they're not too lengthy. So we go through here and we go, oh, that's well written. I like that. I like that. Oh, look at this one. Somebody went on and on and on, had way too. Oh, I'm sorry. We haven't. I'm sorry. No, that comes a little later. That's the edit text next. I got ahead of myself. Mainly here, we're just checking the node colors. Okay. Then we hit sort and edit text. Now notice this will automatically rearrange these by yellow, purple, and blue. And then this is what I meant to say. Now we go through and make sure they're worded properly. And if somebody got a little bit wordy here on these, that's where we say, oops, that's a little too wordy. Better clean that guy up a little bit here. And that's how we make sure that this works later. Because as you can imagine, we're going to create a bunch of cool charts a little later on, and we got to be able to read what these all say. Okay. Now we've got them edited. Now we're ready to have individual team members go off and do this. So I'll send, so let's say Scott and I are on a team just by ourselves here. Okay. So normally you'd have 5, maybe 10 people. Some people had 20. And by the way, they don't have to be licensees. They don't even have to be on your team. They could be a professor at Purdue University or something that you want to include in this. And then we come down here, we edit the way the email is written, make sure it looks really good. And then we hit this button here, and we go ahead and send a survey. And lo and behold, it just popped up my my Outlook, and there's a nice link for me to click. And so I'm one of the team members, so I am going to go and take this survey. Okay, so I'm going to click start survey, and then I'm going to go through here and I'm going to start answering these. How important is it that customers are willing to pay a fair price premium? Ooh, that seems pretty important. Hit the next button. And how certain are you they're willing to pay a fair price premium? Well, I better put that down perhaps. And then we repeat the process. Once again, how important is it? And then once again, how certain are we? And so forth. So we go through this. I won't do it obviously now, but as I'm clicking all these things, I will be going through all the yellow and then the purple and so forth. Now, let's imagine that that has been completed. Now, I have to show you a little different view now because we finished that part of the workshop. And now I have to show you what happens in subsequent steps at the workshop. So here, what have we done so far? Let's just take a quick peek. We've, let's see here. Oh, that's okay. I was going to show you the steps. But basically, we brainstormed assumptions, built the consumption chain, and did individual ratings. And now we are ready for the team ratings. Okay. Now, when we get together, of course, these are all empty. The first thing we do is we look at a histogram and say, oh, look at that. 4 people gave it an important, 1's a crucial, 1 gave an essential. Let's see, what do we want to rate this? And maybe we say, yep, important. And maybe we go with this. Now, here's the thing. We've learned some rules over the years. Don't just take the average. Don't just do a kind of a rough consensus. You let everybody debate and discuss why they said what they said. But let's imagine that everybody thinks it's important, but Will is going, oh, I think you guys are nuts, man. I think this thing is essential, okay? And after good discussion, where first we share our knowledge, second, we share our opinion, and third, we start repeating our opinion, which isn't that valuable. After all the discussion, Will is saying, nope, I think you guys are wrong. I think this is essential. Guess who wins? The most cautious voice on the team. Will wins. And then we get ready for certainty rating. And most everybody up here are like confident. Oh, we can do this. This is no problem, And Zach goes, I don't know. I think you guys are overconfident. I wouldn't give this more than a perhaps. And after some conversation, who wins? The most cautious voice on the team, and that's Zach. So what we don't want to do is get a false green in here. and never pay attention to it anymore. We can always learn more later. And then we can also put down here our source of truth and the findings so we know why we gave it what we gave. And then we just simply go through all this, just keep clicking the next button on all these. Now, this is a completed one I'm showing you, so it's not quite as much fun, but that's how we do this. We get into purple, and we get into the blue, and so forth. So questions at all on how the team does its ratings before I go to step 5? Guys, good? Now, certainty matrix, we review these. There's actually 6 of them. There's one for market dynamics, one for internal capabilities. And remember, we had 2 types of outcomes. We had one for required, and we had one for desired. But here's the funky thing that we probably don't have time to go into a lot here. When we get into the blue outcomes, there's really 2 questions. One is, how certain are we that customers want to maintain the existing fluting size? And then the other one is, how confident are we can actually do that with a solution, maintain it? So that's how the blue end up being 4 different certainty matrices. One, required versus desired, and the other, how certain are we on the customer's outcomes, that they really want that, and how certain are we on our solutions. I'm throwing a lot at you in a very short order, but that's why you end up with 6 certainty matrices. Then you create a checkpoint plan, and I won't spend too much time on this, but basically what you do is you create some tasks here that will help you drive these from uncertainty to certainty. So you have a task, and you'll have an owner here, and due date, and so forth. And if you already create a task earlier that might help you with this, you can always just drag it over here. It's a pretty efficient way of doing this. And that kind of finishes up your workshop, if you will. Well, what happens after the workshop? Well, let's say the teams meet every 2 weeks, for instance. Now what they do is they update their tasks here. So we say to Jeff, hey, Jeff, you ran some durability testing. Did you have any results to share? Well, it didn't really help DS3. I don't know about abrasion resistance yet. But you know what, this one, fade resistance. Yeah, I got some results on that. Let's click on that. Notice it put the results here. Jeff tells us what the fade resistance results are. Jeff, did that boost the certainty? Oh, yeah. I mean, I am confident we have no problem now. So it just went from a yellow up to a green. So DS5, when I go back here, is now off the chart. Now I can filter this and I can show all the green ones, and DS5 comes back, oops, sorry about that, the wrong button there. DS5 comes back for this if I want to look at it, but we don't usually bother with the green ones. That's how we do this. And then what the team does is, on a regular basis, they review the results. So watch what happens when I hit this little blue play button. So in the upper left, we had a lot of yellow and red initially. And then over time, we started driving these down because of the checkpoint plan. Notice in the upper right, the bubbles are coming into the origin. We're moving along, we're learning more and more as we go, and we're getting rid of a lot of these uncertainties. And you probably notice a lot of the yellow and red in the bar charts are turning green as well. Then we can check these out anytime we want, see what things are looking like. And now this is a project that's near the end. That's why there's not much yellow and red left. Step number 7, and then I'll see if there's any questions. We create a checkpoint, we create a de-risking report. I can always go in and edit it whenever I want. And then I can also go in and make a 2-page PDF whenever we want. And this is a great thing to send to management on a regular basis. Even if you're not having a presentation, consider giving them a monthly update so they can see how things are going. So you never want to surprise them. And then when it's time to make a presentation, just download the PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint is just a 6-slider. And basically what you would do with management is say, here's my overview. Here's the uncertainty profile. Here's how we're driving down uncertainties. Here's how we're moving in. And basically, if you're in the upper right, you're just informing management. You're not asking for decisions. Later, when you get in the lower left, you may be asking for investment and decisions. But you have to educate management a little bit on what you want and don't want out of them at these meetings. If you see some possible landmines or probable landmines, you want to let them know before they actually become confirmed landmines. Never want to surprise management, and then let them know what your recommendation is. Maintain, accelerate, withdraw, or redirect. And that is basically it for the software. You can also create a PowerPoint and add a lot of other slides in. I probably won't bother you with that right now. But questions at all on Minesweeper project de-risking, how it fits with blueprinting, anything else?
There were some similar topics when you build the business case out, which I haven't completed. We're still in the preference interview phase.
Yeah.
Maybe just describe the steps you go through to do some de-risking in the business case versus, the final output of this.
Yeah, great comment. So we mean blueprinting versus Minesweeper, how those kind of final reports compare with each other then, Zach?
Right.
Yeah. So, in blueprinting business case, if you were doing a market case, which is, after preference interviews, it is dealing with the risk also. But it's really commercial risk. In a new product development project, we're basically down to commercial risk and technical risk, right? And so blueprinting is really about driving out commercial risk in the front end of innovation. And it does it in a market case by making sure we know what customers want and do not want with a market satisfaction gap on their outcomes. If you go to the blueprinting business case, it continues to drive out commercial risk by helping you do a side-by-side comparison of competitors. So, that's step 4 in blueprinting. And that says, okay, we know what customers want and don't want. Now we also know what competitors can and cannot do. So we've really eliminated a lot of commercial risk. So in the business case, you're absolutely right. It does add a few other things. It adds a very rough assessment of technical risk. It adds a little bit of a project plan. It adds some financials in there. The heart of it is about commercial risk, but it does give, let's think of it this way. It gives the team that's in blueprinting and ready to go into development, that's on the whole 12-point business case, an opportunity to tell management, here's what we assess as the risk level going forward beyond just commercial risk. It's kind of crude. It's kind of more of an assessment. It's almost more of a communication device. So that's what we have in blueprinting. In Minesweeper, it's much more granular. It's more all-encompassing. It could be addressing and probably will be addressing operational risk, technical risk, regulatory risk, well beyond just the commercial and competitive risk. So it's broader in that standpoint. And it also lets you dive down into every one of the assumptions. And so you'll know exactly where your risk is coming from. So I would call it broader in terms of the types of risks and also more detailed in helping you understand them than blueprinting. Does that help, Zach?
Yep. Thank you.
You bet. Other questions that we might have? Well, before we go to the open line, we'll see if you have any general questions on blueprinting in general. Let me tell you the question that I'm sometimes asked that I cannot answer. And I feel a little bit bad about this, but I'm still learning. So we've been telling people for a long time that this is for transformational projects. And one of our top blueprinting accounts for many, many years has just done some amazing things with blueprinting for, well, probably since 2013, I would say. My main handler there, a delightful lady, whenever she hears me saying this, she would give me a little dope slap up the side of the head and say, Dan, Minesweeper is not just for transformational projects. We're using it on all of our projects. And so that's the answer. That's a question I cannot answer. At what point do you say, no, it's not really worth doing Minesweeper on this blueprinting type project? I just don't know where that point is. All I know is that today, there are so many transformational projects where companies really are spending, they're blowing $1 million a year, got several people on the project, it's unfamiliar markets, it's unfamiliar technology. They have very few successes like this to show for it. That is such a rich target environment that's where we're focusing today. But I can't tell you that in 3 years or 5 years, we won't say, wow, boy, you really ought to bring some elements of Minesweeper into even the core market. That's something I'm still learning. We got conflicting results here or points of view from at least one client. Okay, that's it for me on Minesweeper. Anything else on Minesweeper? Okay, now you may not have anything, in which case we'll all get on with our Mondays. But if anybody's got a general question, maybe you've been working in a certain market segment, maybe you're having a hard time getting interviews set up, maybe you're wondering about some interview techniques, anything at all is fair game. And as we always do, we've got a system here. I'm going to take the easy questions. And Scott, I think you said you take the hard ones. Is that what we said?
You got it.
Okay, great. So any questions at all from anybody? And I'll be patient and let silence be out there for a few seconds. I heard that was a good moderating tip, Scott. I heard that from somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Dan and Scott, one of the things I run across on a pretty regular basis when I'm doing interviews is, so when you went through the workshop, your kind of typical flow in the workshop, you start off with the current state, and the customer, in the perfect workshop scenario goes through their current state, without touching on any problems or ideal state, et cetera.
Right.
In reality, that doesn't actually, well, that never pans out. You kind of get a blended stream of stuff between current state problems and an ideal state, often all in one sentence.
Yeah, exactly. You do your best job, Rick, of giving them kind of a non-problem oriented question, and they start in on and they say, yeah, well, that's the background I can answer, but here's my problem I'm having, right? Yeah. So let me go there for a second with you. Let's go ahead and open up Blueprinter. There's a little trick that I think can be kind of effective. You can try it out and see what you think on this thing. So let's go to a demo here for a minute, and we'll grab one of we'll go our friend Amazon here. And whoa, I hit the wrong button there. Let's try that again. Let me hit this expander. So you're in current state, and these are perfectly good current state questions. How many shipments, what trends? You aren't asking them about, their particular problems. And then they start giving you a bunch of problems. Well, here's a real problem having, and also got moisture resistance problem, right? That's what they're giving you, right? So what you can do, if you can catch it in time and say, hold that thought, let me move here, that's a perfectly good strategy. But here's another thing you can try. We don't talk about this much. You can take and copy these to the sticky notes. And so you'll send them over here. Now, if this was a brand new, interview, of course, they would be up at the top here, right? They'd be up here. And then, so you just keep going, you capture it and so on and so forth. And then what you could do is, let's make it go here. Notice they came over as salmon. Is that salmon? I don't know. They came over as current state. But this, let's say this was, a problem, and that was another problem. What you can do is you can then say, well, let's tell you what, I'd like to talk about that a little bit more with you. Let me move that to the next empty note. It would actually be note number 3, here. And then you can go in and you can change the color of that and you can move on. And then you can go to the other one they were giving you. I guess it was this one here. Highlight it, release your finger, move to the next empty note, and then, come down here and also dive into that one in more detail. But is that something that you think might be able to help, Rick?
Yeah, it actually addresses kind of one of the other things I was actually looking for in the platform, because it would be good if you could have a single view where you'd have current state as well as the problem's ideal state, and so I think what I saw you do enables that basically.
Yes, Yeah, and then, you can also, I haven't tried this before. I think it's going to put, yeah, I'm going to confirm this. Let's see what it did. Look at that, Scott. It put the current state down at the bottom. Interesting. I'd have to physically move those up, but that will, wait a minute. Oh, I know. We got a bunch of top picks in here too. If you didn't have these top picks crowding things up, Rick, it would make it a bunch of yellow and then a bunch of green and then a bunch of blue. It'd be pretty neat looking. Okay. I probably picked a bad example to look at. So that's one. In fact, hang on a second. Let me go over here. Let's do one that doesn't have its top picks yet. So if you've got these all kind of helter-skelter in here, kind of mixed up, then this is a nice way of kind of organizing those. And then the other thing you might consider doing is even going to the full text mode. Now they're again all organized pretty nicely and neatly. Depends what you want to do with it, but that could help a little bit as well. Am I following you right? Is that that sort of thing you were thinking?
Yep. No,
Yeah, cool. Good. And by the way, that brings up another point. What if somebody, I'm asking them some question and they just start giving me background, okay? I've done this before. We've had some clients do this. If they're just giving you background information, you might even want to color it like a current state. And then so the yellow, green, and blue are all outcomes, and you've kind of isolated the background stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
One other thing I run into on a pretty regular basis is, wanting for some projects to differentiate between what customers want in an ideal state versus, an ideal future state, meaning something they don't have today, versus, the baseline functionality they have today that they want to carry forward. Any tips for how to segment those in the platform?
Yeah, customers are funny in these things. I mean, sometimes they'll give you a problem and they'll say, boy, damage from tearing is a problem. And then you'll go over ideal state and say, what would your ideal world look like? And they go, well, it'd be really cool if we didn't have any damage from tearing. And you're thinking, what? And then suddenly you get in the blue and they give it to you again. So I think probably, so first of all, I don't really care what color they're in because it's an outcome is an outcome is an outcome. But I get where you're coming from. I think this is where the probing comes in. And this is where I can say, well, tell me a little bit about what you're experiencing today. And that gives me a better sense for how much tearing they're getting, how much of a problem. So this is where I think the what and why questions come in pretty handy. How often do you see that? Where do you see that? Describe the problem. How big are the tears? Get a good sense for that. And then I think the why question, is this something that, boy, this is something they'd love to see that they really haven't dealt with well at all? Or it's something where they're dealing with it pretty good, but they'd like a little more help. It's probably so blurry on that spectrum, Rick. We probably don't need to worry about the color of the nodes. We probably just need to probe in depth to just understand it as well as we can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm just capturing them all on an ideal state. Just so that way I've kind of got them captured. Then making a note in the box saying, okay, this is, existing functionality I want carried forward. But
Yep. And you can take some pressure off yourself too, because here's the other thing. When we get into the preference interviews, we're going to have a chance to dive a little deeper on that. So if we had one of these that was box tearing, we'd get something on this. And then here's where we get a little more, granular. Well, how satisfied are you with your ability to minimize box tearing now? And I think this is a great place to really get a lot of this captured. And then here's the cool part. So let's talk more, Mr. Customer, about how you measure box tearing. So how would you know if it's a problem? And they might say, well, we count the number of tears that are over a ½ inch. Nobody can see them less than it, whatever. They have some, it's not really a test method, but they have some way of knowing if this outcome is being a problem or not. And then that's when you say, well, tell me what's barely acceptable today. And that's when you really get a good sense for what they're going through today and then what they'd like to get to. So you will, by good probing and discovery, you're going to learn a lot, but then you're going to get a little more granular when you get into preference interviews as well. Okay.
Got it.
Great. Those are good questions. Those were hard enough, Scott. I should have given them to you, but I didn't think in time. Other questions or observations? Anything anybody has? Great.
I got one more if you got time.
Please, Rick. I think nobody is dropping off. These are excellent questions. So thank you. Go ahead.
So I often find with the interview that it takes the right type of person to be able to actually get into ideal state as a topic in and of its own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, often when you kind of go to the ideal state, I find in particular with a lot of engineers, it's just like, you know, well, I'm trying to solve this problem. I already told you about my problem, and you know, I'm trying to solve that. You know, I don't really have a whole lot of comments on what an ideal state looks like. So any thoughts in terms of you know, how you actually get some sort of real responses on ideal state versus, you know, just blank looks?
Interesting. Well, so one thing you might try is you might say, well, this is great. You've given us a whole bunch of problems, and this is exactly what we're looking for. And then you kind of, you know, you go into the ideal state, but imagine, you know, you could have anything you wanted here. Okay. So think of this as like brainstorming out of the box, you know. We can't promise you we'll fix it, but just you can have anything you want. Now, here's what you might try at this point. You might say, tell you what, this takes a little bit more thought because you probably haven't been focused on this, right? I mean, you're working on problems. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm just going to be quiet for 3 minutes here and just shut up. And just if you think of something, jot it down and couple things, whatever, and then we'll collect them. By giving them maybe 3 minutes to kind of, you know, time yourself and think about that a little bit, there's a better chance that they're going to volunteer something. Okay.
Okay. Interesting approach. I'll give it a shot.
Yes. Sometimes that I'm going to give you 3 minutes while you do this silently. That can work to give people a chance to generate more ideas. I'll tell you the other place that works is if you've got, let's say, especially in some countries where maybe in Asia, where if the boss is talking, nobody else talks. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So here you can use exactly that same technique. Tell you what, folks, I bet you've run into a number of problems over time. I'm just going to be quiet for 3 minutes before we even start this thing. And everybody just start writing down any problems you have. And then we'll kind of go around the room, or we'll let people volunteer. That will get more out of everybody else as well. So if you're having a hard time getting things out, give them a little bit of time to think quietly. Once they write it down, they've committed, right? And you'll get some more out of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
call.
good. Wonderful. Any other questions? These were good ones. Well, as always, thanks so much for joining us. I know, Scott, we usually jump over here to see what's next. I have no idea what's next. Let's go to training.
It makes it exciting.
It does make it exciting. I'm hoping it's one you're doing. Let's take a look. Let's see here. Well, we did April 5th.
Yep, it is.
Oh, it is
You hit
one.
the lottery.
Do you want to say a couple words? You've done some really deep thinking on this, and I'm looking forward to this myself.
Yeah, you know, so we look at framing up these markets, and you know, when you're scoping your project, it's just this very fundamental question. Sometimes I phrase it as, who do you want to create value for? Or who is it that you'd like to innovate for? It's kind of interesting. In LinkedIn recently, just for fun, I posted some outcome statements. And I said, which is the best one? And maybe the context will come to mind. And I don't remember exactly what I had, but it was something like minimize the likelihood of blocking a shipping canal. Minimize the time to minimize the likelihood of going aground. And so I had a collection of outcomes around this shipping challenge in the Suez Canal recently, and I got some interesting comments back. But the two questions that people should have asked were one of them was this one. Well, first of all, what's the job to be done? And the next one is, well, who do you want to create value for? And based on who you want to create value for, that would help you to know which of those outcomes were best suited for the Suez Canal situation. So anyway,
Excellent.
So we'll get into that in a little bit here in a couple of weeks.
That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Hope you all can join us. Thanks for taking the time today. Hope you all have a great rest of the week. And as always, if you have a question or anything we can help with, don't wait for a Monday masterclass. Just reach out. You know where we live. So thanks, everybody.
Take
Have
care,
a good
everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.